Bum, bum,
Let's
bum.
see
I
here.
wonder if Noah needs the thing, and we are officially live. Here we go. Bum, bum,
Yay!
bum. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. It's good to see you, and hear from you, and all that good jazz. Dun, 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 dun. Where am I? Noah, make sure. Link. Um, we have an excellent show for today, as we do every day, every Monday. Uh, I'm gonna pass it over to Mac to start us off.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Workshop Show. My co-host and the producer of the show is the guy with the earphones and the real microphone, Daniel Andrew Boyd.
And over here is Mac. He is my buddy and a lover of storytelling, and he is my co-host for today.
All right. Well, let's sort of shake this out and see how this is all going to shake out for today. I also want to introduce quickly TJ, who is your connection if you're watching online. He's your connection, and he monitors the chat and keeps us all connected with you. So, Dan, we're going to start off with a 20-minute lesson. Is that still the plan?
We're going to start off with the story, and we'll
Okay.
do a little workshop, and then we'll do the lesson.
Okay, that sounds great. So we're going to start out with one of the stories tonight, one of the storytellers. Our feature tonight is Vanessa Tardif. You're in for a real treat with her. And then we're going to embed a lesson during that story. Or right after that story. I'm doing a great job tonight.
We're on top of it.
Then we're going to introduce the crew. I think using a prompt, and the prompt is one way to get my attention is, and so we encourage you to participate if you're in chat. One way to get my attention is, you're going to hear two stories tonight, one from our featured teller and one from a member of the crew. After each story, there'll be an opportunity for feedback, which is like questions, comments, suggestions to the storyteller. And then the first part of the real workshop magic begins, because what happens then is you get to see in real time each one of these storytellers engage in a creative process with the crew, in how they might change their story, how they might tighten it up, how they might actually use that feedback, and they immediately tell the story again. And you can see how the story's been transformed or changed. And we can decide together with the storyteller, did it work better? Were the suggestions helpful? Did it get closer to the heart of the story? Was the story more effective? Right now, there's something, I forget. Something about us all being friends here, Susan?
What?
Yes, we are all friends here. Either we've just met each other and are friends, or we've been friends for a long, long time. But either way, we are friends. And so if we give you a suggestion on your story, it is all in loving to just play with stories. Don't take it personally. We're not actually doing a personal agenda on you personally. We just like playing with stories. So help us play with your story if you're the storyteller, and that's all we ask. So have fun with it.
Great. Thank you, Susan. It's really important to know and remember that any feedback we give really is to the story itself. It's not critical of the teller. Then we're going to end, if you stick around for the whole show, the next part of the magic happens. And this is something I've never seen done in story workshops before, but I personally really love. And that is one of our crew members, right at the end of the show, will pick one story that they've heard and they will tell that story in their own voice. And we'll talk later about really just before that, why we do this crazy thing and how it can really be helpful in understanding stories and how they work. So back to you, Dan.
Awesome. Thanks everybody. Once again, we're changing it up from our normal switch up. And what we're going to do is we're going to start straight in with the story. And this is just something we're trying because the workshop is an iterative process and we try new things with the format just like we would be trying new things with stories and things like that. And sometimes you got to try it out a couple times before you see what the good and what the bad is. So Vanessa, do you feel ready to do the first rough draft of your story?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes. Okay. Just give me 1 second. Just scrolling up here. Okay. On November 3rd, 2016, some friends and I gathered for what we believed would be a short and boring election night party. I've never had a party for an election, but I was with someone who wanted to commemorate the first woman president being elected. We made a silly drink with blue Hawaiian punch, blueberries, and gin called the Blue Suit, and I donned a nasty woman t-shirt. Even though she was not my first pick, I was impatiently waiting for Hillary Clinton to give her acceptance speech so I could go to bed early because I had to work the next day. It never entered my mind that anyone, no matter how much they wanted to stick it to Democrats, would ever vote for someone like Donald Trump. His lack of experience, integrity, egregious dalliances with women, and bigotry would certainly alienate him from those who held themselves aloft as moral Christians, right? As our electoral map began to turn crimson, the carefree mood of the night also began to turn sour. Our clutch of friends gripped their seats as Pennsylvania was about to be decided. And when it was, we finally turned off the TV and exchanged glances in silent shock. We looked at the clock and it was 3 a.m. Most of our party was comprised of people whose human rights had recently made incremental progress and were suddenly on the wrong side of a deeply carved line. People of color, queer, trans, or all of the above. A campaign where a man boasted the values of greed, racism, and ire had captured a nation's need for something, and my privileged naivete left me baffled as to what that was. I tried to spread reassurances that similarly minded people have taken office, and artists and those on the margins have persevered. But I recoil now at how stupidly nostalgic that was. If I'm to be fully honest with myself, it was my own discomfort that I was trying to soothe. I can sympathize and have compassion, but my privileged position keeps me from truly knowing the terror of being undocumented or anybody that wasn't white. My naivete was a product of privilege, but I still needed a light at the end of the tunnel to focus on. Hope or optimism was in short supply for me at the time, and that was where Star Trek came in. So that's what I have thus far.
Yeah. That is cool. Let me think. Boom, 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 boom. All right. I find this surprising. I did not know the story.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask what is our typical first question. And it's, how did it feel reading for you? Like doing it right there, how did it feel?
It was like, it was because of where I'm at today, as opposed to that night, it's almost embarrassing to share like what the emotional process was of that night. Because I feel like such a different person now. But I feel like that story is really important because like, I want to own up to my embarrassing feelings that led me to the show, because it was I don't think I really emphasized enough exactly how much despair I was experiencing at that point.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to, I needed something because the news and everything that was coming out around that time was just so dark, and hopeless, and like rights were being shaved away day after day. So I just need something to say, you know what, this could be a dark chapter. Not to say that what came before it was great, but like, I wanted to contextualize what was happening at that point, in a larger narrative that had a better outcome than what was lying ahead. So
Yeah. That's great. That's great. It looks like, Mac, do you have something?
Sure. What a great beginning to a story, Vanessa.
Thanks.
Really what you gave us was kind of an anecdote, a scene. Here you are, you know, here's your despair. And then you said something that was amazing, that made it a story, which was, and then I decided to start the show, right? So what I want to encourage you to do is to think about, in the retelling, to think about continuing the story from there, because you've left me anyway, like hanging.
Yeah.
And there's one thing about stories that makes them work, is if you can escalate, if you know, and you have a real escalation there. I watched a little bit of your show, so I know a little bit of what that's about, but how you got from where you were at the right where you stopped that story, actually the work you did and what happened. I think that's your story.
Okay.
And you can do that without reading, you can, because you know what happened. So that's just one suggestion for retelling.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. What sort of questions do I have? I think that your how do you feel answer opened up a lot for me. I think that there are avenues for explicitly talking about that feeling of embarrassment. And there's places to, just like you said, upping that sense of despair. Like, you knew what was going on. I also appreciate that in that I relate that it felt very impossible. When it happened. I've got some questions about the ending and things like that, and I want to I don't not push back, but like, no, this is where I'm going to start. I have an anecdote that's really quick, and I had a friend who went to a convention, and it was like a Comic-Con type thing, and there was a panel of people who were into furry culture, and they were talking about what they were doing and just like sort of the process and the logistics of it, and what it was about for each of them. And a guy stood up, one of the first questions, and he asked this person dressed in a rat costume, and he was like, why? And the guy deadpanned, looked straight at him and at the audience and said, when Bush got elected a second term, I just didn't want to be human anymore.
Yeah.
He said there's about 25% of the audience who was like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
And this a little bit reminded me of that there's like this idea that like something happened in the political realm that, you know, what's your response going to be?
Yeah.
And
it became a lot less. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
It just became a lot less like something you can kind of look at from afar and have faith that things were sort of going to work out. And it became a lot more personal and immediate and urgent. And
yeah.
so I definitely I have compassion for the rat man.
Yeah, there's this sense that right, I consider myself an optimist and a futurist, but there's this sort of line that it's not inevitable. Things don't inevitably just get better. You actually have to do things and strive for it. And sometimes that striving creates a conflict, and sometimes you're striving for the wrong thing, but that conflict creates discussion, which creates the new, better thing. So this is like a really, like Max said, it feels like an anecdote, and then you get to the end, it turns into a story. And I think there's a deep connection that people are going to feel from it. Before moving on to like structure stuff, do people want to jump in?
Yeah, I loved the beginning of it, and even though like I felt a lot like that, but some parts a little differently, it just like brought me straight back to that time. You did so well with it. And then I did want just to hear a little bit more about Star Trek, because I was kind of like, I was just kind of like, what? Huh? So, but it would definitely,
that's fair.
But if it's like a hook to make people go like find your YouTube or whatever, like it would totally work, because like I would start Googling like crazy to figure out what you were talking about. So I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to jump in? I'm looking at nods and faces. Boom. Okay. Then let's play around with structure and how we're gonna come up with the payoff. There's a question, and this might be a little riffing between Mac and I. Do you want to hear Mac sort of a thesis statement at all in the beginning?
I don't exactly know what you mean. I love the beginning.
Do you want to know that it?
Go ahead.
Do you want to know that it's about Star Trek at all, or that we're going to get into? Do you want to know, hey, this is the story of how I got into what I'm into now? Or do you like it better as a surprise?
It's a little like starting a story and say, and then I jumped off the cliff. But if it ends there, so it's because that's actually, I think, what you did, Vanessa. You jumped off the cliff, kind of, and so what I think the surprise is there, and I think that's just fine. But then to know there's a long fall, there's some swimming involved, maybe there's some waves to avoid, there's something that happens there. So that's all. And I think, Vanessa, your detail is great about the drink you made, and about you go into a narrative function where you talk about your discomfort, sort of step outside yourself and you talk about that time. But that's what I think, Dan. I think it can go right. It's so one thing leads to the other. The election leads to Star Trek.
Yeah, what do you let's hear about so let me ask you questions about the show and how it's happening now. Does it still feel like that was the reason, or does it feel like the reason evolves as you do more episodes?
Great question.
I think what a detail I may add is that when I was introduced to Star Trek through my ex-partner, It was from a very carefully curated list of very highly rated episodes. So I had the impression that there was this very high bar of quality throughout all of the series and all of the movies, when in fact I was watching a very carefully chosen bits of episodes, and that sent a very clear social justice message, and the writing was good, and also the movies were edited by my ex-partner as well, so I haven't even seen like the original cuts of those things, so it was a very like tightly bound bit. And yes, at first that original purpose was to see that hopeful future, because that's all I saw from Star Trek at that point. And then when I went back to watch the lower rated episodes on my own, that's when I found a new purpose, because I'm like, wow, they made some really huge mistakes here, and not just like in terms of structure, but in terms of messaging. Where the social justice message is completely wiped off the board in place of a white guy's perspective. I mean, it's always been that up until recently, but like, it really pokes through on certain episodes to the point where you don't even know what the point is. Like, what is this moral high ground they're standing on top of anymore? And so what I found was like, you know, it went from idealism to a sort of realistic perspective of Star Trek.
Okay,
and
so that really helps flesh out where this could be and go and create a longer set of arc. Clock up and think about it. So then you've got the scene with the election. I think one of the things that you did really well is it felt crowded to me. It felt like there were a lot of people there. Like I could imagine that, but I didn't need their names, and I understood that the story was your story. This is going to be your journey, and all these people are around, and that's a hard thing to do, to have a lot of characters and keep us as a listener to being able to focus on the main character's point of view. So that was really cool about it. And then right now it just ends on this is why I found Star Trek so hopeful. And how I found it. So there's also this sort of origin of this partner. So in that sense, did the person bring it to you because they just loved it?
That's the thing. I don't even remember exactly what initiated the sort of like, let's watch this together. I think she just sort of randomly said, hey, let's just start watching Enterprise, because I haven't seen it. And so that was something we watched together. For the first time. So it was just sort of like an off thing, but then it became much more important and became like it fulfilled a vital emotional need after a while.
Yeah, I think that there's there's a lot of room for like pretty language in that section to think about that and expand on it, where you're like, you know, when you're in a low place, art, even pop culture style, can really hit you. And sometimes that stuff hits you the hardest. You know, sets you free. And then with this extra part, you're like, this is a refuge, this is an escape in a way from this world and this idea that the world could be better. And then there's this twist on page 72 where you're like, and then one day I realize that I'm watching this curated list of this thing, or that I realize, I like this enough. I'll watch the bad episodes. And then you
Yeah.
watch the bad episodes and you're like, oh no, they're so bad.
Yeah. Like I'd be watching them and telling her, my ex-partner, I'd be like, oh wow,
Yeah.
this episode's so great because it's so bad. And she's like, you're gonna watch that on your own. Like it was not a shared enthusiasm.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think then it becomes this cool thing that you can tie back into that moment, right? Into that election moment of, it may not be much, but it might be because it's got this tie to pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm motivated to do it, and this is my reaction, and this is my way of adding to the conversation of making the world a better place, because I had this thing happen where I thought we were going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And
thank you for helping me like flesh out like the sort of like emotional through line, because I guess that's sort of what I struggled with, was like
yeah. And then I think there's your ending, and then we've built the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, this is where it came together. I'm gonna throw it to Kay, and then I'm gonna throw it to Noah, and then boom, 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 boom. And then TJ, if you have something, let me know. Yeah, do you have thoughts to drop on us?
I find recently that the stories of other people are just triggering me and dropping me into my body when I had similar experiences to what I hear. So yes, like the mounting dread, I become this audience member, this like participant and audience member when like Vanessa is sharing about like, oh, the night is going on and we continue to see the electoral map turn red. I was just like, obviously, because we haven't placed certain legal sanctions on that administration to keep them from coming back into power officially, it's almost like there's a never-ending cliffhanger, honestly. And when you start sharing about like Star Trek and like another way to deal with what you're experiencing when otherwise it feels sort of a deep, disempowering situation, it's like, I'm with you. I'm ready to go, where nobody has gone before too. Like we need to come up with some new solutions, because just hearing about other people's experiences, like I said again, and I'm like, yeah, I remember when the room turned sour too. I remember when people got up for that bathroom break and it was like, you didn't need to use the bathroom. You needed to fall apart. Like, is this happening? So thank you. I think you did a great job of like putting us there in the room with you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, throwing it over to Noah, who has unmuted himself.
I have unmuted myself. Yeah, I mean, that's a great scene, and I think I think probably a quarter to half the country can identify with that night. I don't know if we all stayed up. I know I did. I was in Chicago at the time, and we were watching Fox News for some reason. So it was like the inverse emotional arc on Fox News to what we were feeling, which was kind of weird. They got more upbeat as the night went on. And then in regards to your story, yeah, I really, the setting the stage for the party, like as Dan said, you feel that there's a commotion, there's a party going on, but there's also this quietness, as we're all sort of feeling, as you're feeling what's happening. And I guess kind of my comment was, we talked about sort of extending past the end of that party, but I felt like maybe another way to go with it is like really delving into that emotional journey that you had and sort of the realizations that you're making. That could be something to flesh out as well. And then maybe a little bit there's a parallel, like you're happy at the beginning of the election night and you're disappointed at the end, and you're happy at the beginning of your journey through Star Trek, and you're a little less so in the end, but you make it work, right? Something good comes of it. That's all. Yeah, I think that's sort of what I was thinking about listening and thinking about it after.
Where am I? I can't find myself. There we go. Shout out to Mr. Wiley. Thank you for making it. And shout out to NLSC 6 for being in chat with everyone. Now, there are
also,
a bunch of people.
Hey Dan, I also want
Yeah.
to say thank you to, I can't pronounce this, I'm gonna butcher it, W Bolsher 47. Sorry, I fucked up your name. Thank you for the follow. If you haven't already, please do follow us.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's a good note. Yeah. So we are trying desperately to get to our 50 to get us in the top 50% of Twitch channels. And our goal is to get there by our first show in April. We're going to do a big April Fool's style show. We got a plan. We've been working on it. And so if you are in the chat and you haven't yet hit that follow button, if you're watching and aren't in chat, sign up for Twitch, hit that follow. That helps us out a ton. It puts us in the algorithm, and they start promoting our show to random people once we get to that 50 mark. We're talking about this. What is the next step? So what we're going to do, starting out talking to people because more people jumped in to chat. We told the first story. We've given some feedback. We're going to finish the feedback up, and then we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to give Vanessa 15 minutes or so to sort of process the feedback, and then I'll be doing a lesson, and then once the lesson's over, we're going to check in with Vanessa and have her give a second go of her story, trying to incorporate this feedback, and we'll see what the next draft looks like. So just so I know that you have an idea of where you're going, I don't know if you're taking notes. Do you want me to go through the flow of what I think we've sort of agreed on the story is going to go through, or can I throw it to you and say, repeat back to me what you think you're going to changes you're going to make, kind of thing?
I have a question about what I'd report back with exactly.
Yeah.
Like, would I just continue from where I stopped, or would I retell it? Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And you don't need to read the part. You can tell it. This next part where you do it a second time can be all colloquially.
Okay.
If that is easier, or you do it how you feel most comfortable.
Okay. So if you could just run the bullet points.
Plot points. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So currently you start off election night, big scene, and then it goes to through that emotional journey, it goes to, and then I find Star Trek, which is this sort of refuge because it's a hopeful future that I'm just not feeling right now, and it's what I need. And then the bullet point after that is I'm watching these things, I'm getting into it, so into it that I'm willing to stop watching the curated stuff. And once I get into that, I have to wrestle with this thing that was sort of pure has turned not so pure, and what's my response going to be? And my response is to create this YouTube channel where I embrace the bad by also discussing it and having a conversation with it, and then letting that conversation be the good that comes. And then you can, in that ending discussion, you can try to tag back to, I was feeling hopeless, and now it spurred me to action. Okay. So think about that, and it will be, it's a hard thing to do. So do not be stressed or anything like that. Like, you can take pauses and deep breaths, and you've got time.
Yeah, we can see it in your face. You seem worried. No pressure. Whatever. If you decide while you're talking that you want to change things up, that's okay. Because most times when people come on here and tell a story, they start to go off the rails with how they tell it, and they realize that they like that portion a lot better than how they originally wrote it. So don't get nervous. It's okay. If you don't hit all the points, perfectly fine. Yeah. It's an exercise.
Vanessa, one more thing for you, Vanessa, is you can do this. You can pick just a few scenes from this Star Trek journey. So you can just be in front, watching, thinking, just like you did with the election night, just pick a few scenes and to guide you through that. And you can pick any order you want to make that work. All right. And I agree. Thanks, TJ. It's really important not to get tense about this. Just have fun with it. You were there, share it with you. I can't wait to hear the story and how you got there.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up, I am going to do a little bit of a lesson, and we'll see how this goes. And if people want me to do a do-over and 15 minutes, do that lesson again. That needs another draft. That could be where it is. So I've been doing these master classes. I'm leaving it on. I've been doing these master classes. Liar, I'm taking it off. This is my mask of choice. Bum 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 bum. So I'm third time I've been doing these master classes, and I'm doing the one with Neil Gaiman, and I have to say, I have done a lot of storytelling classes. I've taken a lot of writing courses through college and through online things. I read reams of books. I have never had an experience like watching Neil Gaiman talk about his writing process. And I was just like really floored. He opens it up talking about how fiction is lying. And you're just lying to people when you're writing a fiction work. And my brain is like slightly melting because I've never heard this concept before, that you're just, if you write a fiction story, you're the biggest liar that ever lied a lie. And I sort of codify it, and I'm like, okay, this is just the language he's using for imagination. He's just calling it a lie. But then as it goes on, he has more and more chapters where he just doubles and triples down on this theory of lying. And he sort of goes deeper into what he means about it. And he starts talking about it. And he's like, I write books, and they're in my books, as though, we don't have any idea what Neil Gaiman writes. He's like, in my books, sometimes I'll write about vampires or werewolves, and neither of those things exist. They're just made up. I'm just lying. And it's like, what are you talking about? And then, so it made me, and there's like just a lot of parts where he talks about writing in these sort of just goofy childlike ways where I was compelled to call people. Mac really likes George Saunders, and he pushed me to pick up and go through George Saunders' book. And at the end of George Saunders' book, there's this chapter that really struck me, and it's something that I talk about, but that I really love the way he encapsulated it and explained it. And this is how I'm going to explain it for the like rest of time, is that at the end of the book, he's like, this is how to write a book the way I write a book. And if you follow these steps, you'll write like me and it'll be kind of garbage. You know, you can only get so good following the exact steps of another author. And he says, listen to your heart. And there's going to be certain points where you're reading my book and you're going to say, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't seem right. Listen to that. Don't just throw it away. Wrestle with it. Go deep with it. See why. Argue with it. Go through that process in your head. And when you come out the other side, that's where your voice is. You know, how you wrestle with these parts. And I really, really think that like you can find out other people's processes. You can work with coaches and teachers and you will learn things. But you can't just mimic it. You've got to encapsulate it and figure it out and wrestle with it and make it your own, because that's the only way to get it to work for you. And so I'm just going to say this Neil Gaiman one, at first I was just like, this is terrible. But after I had been through it and told people how sort of terrible it was multiple times, I started to be like, this is just a really different process. And this different process helps me figure it out. And what he seems to do with this idea of lies and fiction and all that is he sort of comes at writing his works from a point of view where he is a bit of a method actor. And he talks about this throughout the whole series, not in these terms, but he talks about the process. And one of the things he says he does, and this is where it started to click on with me, was that he puts the work away. He just goes through a first draft as quickly as possible. He tries to write for as long as possible, as many consecutive days as possible, and just get that first draft finished, is the way that he made it sound from this work, which is like, again, just totally crazy. I don't know anybody who does that. My personal process, especially when I'm writing longer things, and I got this from a Chinese American author who wrote a thing about his processes. I don't like to leave a page that I'm not on my second or third draft of. I just like it to be really crisp before I move on to, maybe I'll do 2 pages. But that's for me. I want it to be really solid before I move on and understand the structure. He's not like that. He's just like, and he has very little sense of where it's going. He has characters, and he tries to imbue those characters with conflict and with desire for things. And where they go, they go. And the end will happen. And it's in his drafting process that he figures out what the links are. And he only starts looking for themes at the end. This is at least how he explained it in the course. So that's interesting of itself. But what brought this lying thing together for me is when he sets it away, he walks away from it for about 2 weeks, sometimes more, he says, and he tries as hard as he can to forget that he wrote it And when he comes back to the piece, he tries to pretend that he's never read this thing. He has no idea where any of these characters are going, and he's going to just be as brutal as if this was sent to a slush pile, and he is the burnt out editor, the young intern, and then he just reads it and is like, red mark everywhere, garbage, garbage, more garbage. Why wouldn't he explain this? Blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, you are a madman. I could never do this. That's maniacal. Like, how do you forget you just spent, months writing these things, living and breathing these characters, and then you're just like, I've never seen Jim, the protagonist, ever before. Who is this Coraline? So anyway, that method is part of this lie thing for him, I think, too, is that he sort of thinks about it that way. I'm pulling a fast one on people as he writes these fantastical things, and he gets this sort of duping joy. I'm going to write about fairies and pirates, and they get together and they fight each other, and people are going to believe it. And that coming to a work with that kind of, whether that is 100% true or my misinterpretation of what happened in this class, I think what I've learned is that coming with a different mindset can really change your voice and the work. And you don't have to come from writer Dan, writer Vanessa, whoever your identity is. We've talked about a little bit, like this threads into a few weeks ago when we were talking about narrator versus character for a long time. Your narrator can be anybody. Your hard-boiled narrator isn't the same as your tender, loving fiction, isn't the same as your picture book narrator. You have all these senses of selves, and you get to choose these narrators, and you can take your picture book narrator and apply that to your hard-boiled and see what happens. And you can be a different self when you're writing. And that might be a way for you to find out what your voice is just by playing with it. And he talks about, doing this a lot with short story. And that's a good place to play with these things and decide where you want to take it in the long run. That is one thing. I skipped over it, but I'm going to say it now. In my process of just being excited about finding this Neil Gaiman class so interesting, because one of the things about why it's so interesting, and this idea that he is the freeform writer who doesn't do plot points, he creates some characters in his head and just lets them run wild. One of the reasons I haven't run into many teachers who teach that, or writers who have written books about that experience, is because those people, though they exist and there's a plethora of them out there, they tend to not talk about their work. The people who talk about their work are the ones, or particularly their work in process, are the ones who tend to be, I create either a skeleton, or I do a huge plot point thing. You will find authors, I'm gonna screw it up, but John Gardner's a pretty big plotter, and he really goes into the structure of what he wants. Brandon Sanderson does skeletons, and if he ever gets caught a little bit stuck, he's like, then I fill out my skeleton more. I flesh that out. And in his talks, he talks about these sort of three different, there's people who know every single thing that's going to happen, and there's those that have their beats that they want to hit and create these skeletons, and then there's these people who just come up with it right away. And one of the things that happens to these people who just come up with it, they end up writing stuff that they just can never use. And they get all the way to the end and they're just like, there's no way to make this happen. And so it seems completely terrifying to me. Oh, so going through, this is the point I was trying to get to. Going through this process of calling up my friends to talk about this lie anecdote over and over again, one of my friends that I went to is a writing group on Reddit, and I'm going to super plug them. Writing prompts is just huge. And TJ can take some time to find the link for us and throw it into chat. But it's our writing prompts. They have a Discord, and it's pretty hardcore. And there's tons of people who always want to talk about writing. And as soon as I told them, I was like, I just went through the Gaiman course. They were all like, oh my goodness, what did you think? Because we talked about it 2 weeks ago. And we want to know what you think before we tell you how much garbage we thought it was. And so they too thought the lie thing was just really ridiculous. I got just a tad more time, but I think I'm gonna save it for next week. He's got a really good sense of how dialogue works, and it flows in well with the Judy Blume class and how she thinks about dialogue. And so I'll pair those in next week and talk about creating dialogue and ways to think about dialogue. It's very similar to this idea of being a method actor and how you hold characters in your head. And then also he had a really lovely anecdote about, thank you, TJ. It's in chat. And he had a lovely anecdote about, what am I talking about? Genre. And so we'll talk about that stuff next week. And right now we're going to switch back over to Mac. And Mac, we're going to do the introductions of everybody. And we're going to answer a little question that he previewed for us. And then we will go to Vanessa. Oh, you're on mute. Wait, did I mute you?
No, I did.
I can't.
Hey,
Right.
so I'm going to ask the crew and Vanessa, if you're willing to do it as well, to use this prompt to give us a little slice of who you are. And cumulatively, over the course of the shows, we learn more and more about each one of the crew members. And again, you're welcome to join in the chat and answer this prompt as well. One way to get my attention is, and I'm going to ask the crew members just to jump in on this.
One way you can get my attention is you really can't, mostly. The only way, I think, is if you're doing something really cringy and I'm just dying on the inside of secondhand shame.
So for me, I'm ADD, but I am like a hyper-focused ADD. So it's really hard for people to get my attention because I've decided to focus on something else. So you actually have to touch me, and then that gets me out of the focus.
We gotta talk about that.
I'm gonna jump up and I'm gonna say to chat, I would really like to hear your answers. There are some people in chat who I know are there and listening and haven't spoken much yet. What does it take to get you guys in away and distracted? If you're focused on something, how does somebody best get your attention? Type that into the chat if Time Plus Travel is not working. That would be great. And I'll pop over to Kay.
Well, I do go by Kay, but my full first name has 4 syllables in it. So if you call me by my full first name, that is a good way to get my attention. But it's a double-edged sword. It's become like Be careful. Do you really want my full attention?
Vanessa, do you have an answer for us?
Yes. Sorry, hang on. One way to get my attention is to share a song that makes you dance. I don't know of a more effective tool or emotional shorthand than sharing a song that creates joy.
Great.
Nice.
Thanks, Vanessa. Listen, one way that has always worked for me to get my attention is to dare me to do something or double dare me to do it. Oh man, it's really hard for me to do that kind. I dare you to, yeah. Once I was dared to take my clothes off and get in a river, and there was a chance that the people who were daring me were going to steal my clothes and leave me there. Another story, how I dealt with that.
Does anybody else have to go? I'm not ready yet.
I gotta go. One way to get my attention is to be weird as fuck. I'm pretty zoned out most of the time, and so usually something like odd or like a weird sentence, kind of like it goes in and it kind of registered, and once it goes, I'm like, wait, what? What? So yeah. So actually, Vanessa, your podcast. I saw your last video, and I want to talk about it later on YouTube.
we could go on Discord.
Right?
Yeah. We'll talk about it on Discord. Bum bum bum. Faces. That's gonna be my answer. I'm super into faces, and sometimes when people are walking down the street and I didn't catch and like capture their face in my mind, I will run a block to run ahead of them and turn back around to be like, what did their face look like? I need to know. And that's how people get their attention from
Dan's
me.
really gotten my attention that way a lot of times.
Like Noah's like, where are you going? Bum bum bum. People threw good ones. I need to go back for a quick second to NLSC6. Is there a way that you like that pronounced, or do you like it spelled out like that? Is it a Nix 6? Yeah, is there a way to pronounce that if you wrote it out phonetically? There was a question about fiction versus lies and how does this whole thing end up in my head. And this doesn't answer the question, but one of the anecdotes that it brought to my mind was that I was working with this person and they used to catch me and I would say, oh, I'm sorry that I lied about that. And she would say, you didn't lie. You just didn't know the right information, or you just forgot, or you were mistaken. That doesn't make you a liar. That doesn't mean you lied. And she made a compelling argument that the reason I would say, oh, I'm sorry, I lied about this thing, was that if I lied about it, then I had control of it. And if I was wrong, then I was out of control. And I haven't fully grappled with it, but I think that there's a little bit of that going on for maybe me or Neil Gaiman in this situation of writing. Thank you everybody for introductions, and thank you so much for putting in your answers to what would have you get you going. Vanessa, are you ready? Ready as you'll ever be.
I will do my best.
Yeah.
All right. So, setting the scene, November 3rd, 2016. Friends gathered all around for a really big to-do party. There was at least 10, 15 people there. We served a drink with blueberries, gin, called the Blue Suit, and I wore a t-shirt just assuming that Hillary was just going to win and that we were going to wrap up the evening very quickly. It was going to be a short to do. It wasn't necessarily like jubilant. It was just sort of like accepting like, this is what we got. But then as the election night wound, like we were really hoping, okay, this state is going to turn blue, right? We're checking on the electoral map and paying very close attention. And it's not. It is going the opposite way. And there's this rising feeling of dread in the room. And during commercial breaks, we were trying to play video games and trying to lighten the mood, but it was just not, it was not effective. And as the evening came to a close, a lot of people were crying. And I tried to comfort them by saying, you know, hey, remember the Reagan years? There were a lot of artists that persevered, a lot of people on the margins that persevered, but that was very naive and very cold comfort for what was up ahead. And so I tried to direct my attention towards volunteering or donations or doing something productive in response to the 2016 election of Donald Trump. And but I also needed something emotional to connect with, because it wasn't enough to simply put in time, money, and effort. I needed something to contextualize our time as sort of this was just a bump in the road to something much better. Trek has created a history within itself in the Trek timeline. In our current time is contextualized as one of great tumult, one that is looked upon by characters in Trek with bewilderment, as its barbaric conditions, and relief at the fact that the future has brought much in the way of understanding and caring towards our fellow beings. A Deep Space Nine episode, time traveling episode, showed unemployed or underemployed people rounded up in prison-like neighborhoods where everyone had to fend for themselves. Dr. Bashir was the series' doctor and not known for being much of a history buff, and he threw up his hands in confusion trying to understand why struggles like homelessness and untreated mental illness could exist when housing and treating people is the obviously right thing to do. While I envied that naivete Bashir had at the harshness of the past, I realized that the cycle would continue should we fall into the seductive lull of believing things will work out on their own. Seeing a rough outline of a way forward helped me to understand that anything I contribute is worthwhile, and how I benefit from a white supremacist system, particularly as a white woman, came into much sharper focus. After watching an emotionally resonant and carefully curated playlist of episodes, I went back to watch the rest, which to my surprise were nowhere near as good. From laughably bad to incoherent to sexist and egregiously racist. The assumed innocence of white womanhood put on display in an episode called Code of Honor was the first one that I watched that made me want to start my YouTube channel. As much hope as the show has given me, the self-centered white male perspective imbues the plot along with laughable incongruencies and bad dialogue. I love watching Mystery Science Theater 3000 and even Beavis and Butthead's ripping of music videos, so talking over these episodes out loud just came naturally. The franchise has recently celebrated its 50th anniversary, so there's much of the show outside of the good that was curated for me, so I dove in with abandon. And at first, I believed I would just point and laugh at the show as Mystery Science Theater did, or Beavis and Butthead. But as I created the show video for Code of Honor, I realized that I could have a dialogue with past mistakes. Outside of the classic or highly rated episodes, many of these stories were a reflection of their time in ways that have gone unexamined. I love this show enough to want it to be better. both narratively and message-wise. I also took a lot of inspiration from a YouTube channel called The Needle Drop. And my favorite reviews of his of bad albums, like he's a music reviewer and he does bad albums, and those reviews are especially entertaining because he doesn't really try to necessarily go into every bad aspect, but he does have a sort of light and entertaining bearing about the whole thing. So I drew that inspired me to think I could make an entire channel just about the bad stuff and examine the short-sightedness of these episodes, the bad writing, the bad plots, and as I said before, have dialogue with the past mistakes that they made. And we still make those mistakes now. So it's not as tightly written, but that's sort of where I'm at with that.
Thank you so much. That was really, really great. And I was very impressed with how tightly you got that. And just by having that 15-minute downtime, the stuff about Deep Space Nine that you got in there, the figuring out that, you know, Code of Honor was the exact tipping point. Yeah, that was awesome.
Thank you.
And now what I'm going to say is, if these stories inspire you and you're like, oh, I've got a story about this, or I got a story about that, or just you have free associated and you're like, I wish I could be on their workshop show. Anybody can reach out to me and we can talk about it. I am booked with features far out, but I'll always discuss it. But what I'm going to say is join our Discord. And that's always going to be a place for us to hang out and listen to stories. And if people jump in, we are going to listen to stories for the first 15 minutes of our Discord hanging out. So we'll hit this again. But that's a place for that to happen. And boom, boom, boom. I'm going to throw it over to Mac, and then he's going to introduce the next speaker. And he is also muted.
So before we do that,
yep.
I do want to say, Vanessa, I love the story. I say this every time to everyone. Show more emotion in what you're saying. The story started off it sounded like someone was like, hey, tell that story, you know, that one story about how you started your podcast. So it's kind of like you're just trying to, you know, get it through, but then you start to get into it. So I like to see more of that emotion, the transition when you're there. Like how did that feel, you know, type of thing. It keeps people engaged. That's it. That's all I got.
Great. Well, Vanessa, again, thank you. Thank you for that bit of magic that you just did there. And now I think we're ready for our second storyteller of the evening, and that's Kay.
Yeah, Vanessa, thank you as well. Like, yeah,
thank you for having me.
That turnaround you just did, that's the sweet spot. That's wonderful. So I guess I'm the second storyteller of the evening, and I think Trevor Noah did this at the Grammys last night before Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion came out to perform WAP. He was like, all right, if there's children in the room, just tell them that this next story is about bathing a cat. So that's my intro to this story. If there's children in the room, maybe there shouldn't be, but tell them that this is a story about bathing a cat. So yeah, watching the Grammys last night was awesome. I actually really enjoyed everything that I saw, and I saw it almost from start to finish, which is highly unlike me. Uh, One of the places that I dove in the deepest was when Harry Styles comes out in like plaid and floral and a feather boa, and he sings one of my favorite songs by him. It tastes like strawberries on a summer evening, and it sounds just like a song. And that is that Watermelon Sugar song. I love the Watermelon Sugar song. Um, it is actually about cunnilingus. I'm not sure if everybody knew that, but you should know that, whether that's your thing or not. And honestly, that hasn't really been my thing. I am like a self described sapiosexual. Like, touch is a secondary part of the reason why I get into a relationship with somebody. So, I thought that was hilarious. Like his performance last night was great, but I really like the video that he made and released during an earlier stage of the pandemic, because you see this beautiful backdrop of an ocean and like an endless beach and a huge group of people just piled on top of one another, and the caption comes out and lets you know that this was shot before the pandemic was officially underway, according to our administration. And the caption says dedicated to touching. And obviously, since we are all experiencing some changes with the pandemic in terms of how much and how comfortable we feel touching other people, I thought that was huge. This is a super shift for me, being in a space where I'm thinking about touching at all, because, like I said, just cerebral. I care more about hours and hours of conversation with someone than I do about the physical aspect of our relationship. That's all. I like that, and that's bells and whistles. But, it's bells and whistles for me, and I know that it's meat and potatoes for other people. I lived in Atlanta several years ago, and at that time, I had three other housemates. We rented a four-bedroom house together, and we had this monster sectional couch. When I originally was dating one of my housemates, my former partner, D. When D got a hold of this couch, he was so excited. He was like, "We can fit everybody on this couch. I mean, look at this thing." And it's shaped like an L. And it's a huge floor plan, and like a mostly open floor plan between the front door, the living room, the kitchen. You can see from the front door to the back door. This couch, I feel like if I had to escape and like jump off of a cruise ship, I would want a couch this size, like waiting to catch me, and I could float on to safety maybe, because it's a boat, not a couch. But we've got this couch in the living room, and he comes in one day, and D sees me there with my current partner, and we're very mature, we're very open people. We just speak, "Hey, how's it going?" And he keeps it pushing onto his wing of the house, and I'm still there with my partner. And it's only later when, we're alone, and he's like, "You know something? When we were dating, you never let me stay close to you like that. You two were taking up a single couch cushion on that couch. Like, normally I would have had my space, you would have had your space." And he was absolutely right. Uh, it was totally different for me when I met my partner, Trey. From day one, it was different. So, first of all, when I met him, it was this absolutely perfect spring day. This is like 76 degrees. The breeze is blowing past you, but it's not chilling. The sun is shining, but it's not burning. The air smells good. And of course, it's actually Atlanta Jazz Fest. So, as everybody is approaching the park and this beautiful, like, green setting, you hear the jazz notes just start to kind of creep around the corner. And by everybody, I mean like almost all of my friends in Atlanta, we decide to go to Jazz Fest together. There's like 8 of us. Weed is decriminalized in Atlanta. So they bring their weed. I don't smoke. And I bring my drink. And the house rules of Jazz Fest are, as long as you clean up after yourself and you don't cause a fuss, come enjoy, bring good energy and enjoy some good energy. And that's exactly what we did. Just chill vibes. We're just laying out all our blankets, and all my friends have, our space and our corner on all these blankets. And I look to the right and I see another group of people. They've given us, we've given them a little bit of distance because they were already there, but very similar setup, like a whole gaggle of people. Maybe they're friends, maybe they're brothers and sisters. We don't know who they are. They're strangers at this point. But when I look over, I do a literal Looney Tune style double take. Like I just, at first I just look, just to see who's around. And then just my neck snaps back immediately. And I see this person sitting here, like he's sitting sort of cross-legged style, but he has this really good posture, like maybe he like does a sport or does yoga, or has some sort of stretching regimen that he does. Like he has a posture that's very tall, so you can tell he's like tall and he's aware of his body, even though he looks kind of like he's zoned out to the music. And he's got his like thin wireframe glasses, and his profile is to me, and these long sandy brown locks like past his shoulders. And just like he's got like a tank top on and some ripped jeans. And for whatever reason, I don't know, I might have even said out loud, but I'm at least thinking to myself at this point, who is that? I'm like, okay, game on. And that's like atypical for me. 100%. I don't know. I can notice that somebody is physically attractive to me, but I'm not necessarily intrigued until I hear them speak. This was the absolute opposite of that. And, after 30 plus years of dating at this point and never really being like a first look person, I'm in another headspace, right? So, I actually, my friends are great. My friends are all like natural born wingmen and wing women. So I just kind of talk to them and I'm like, hey, would you mind if we invite, the folks sitting on the other blankets to like come join us? Because keep in mind, this is Jazz Fest. There's plenty of like food and drink and weed and everything to go around. They're like, sure, let them come on down. And so I get up and invite the other 5 people that are sitting across from us to join us. And it's all for this one person. I come back to our blankets after the group decides, yeah, we'll join you guys. Hi, strangers. And I ask my friend Jay if she wants to dance. And I just kind of like extend my hand to her. And she nods her head no, like, girl, I am not going to get up. Um, and to this day, I don't know if she did that because she was trying to help me out. Like, so I guess you're going to have to ask somebody else to dance. Or if she really she had too much weed and she didn't want to get up. But I extend my hand again to Trey, it turns out. And he gets up and he dances with me. And we're dancing to like a really sort of fast paced jazz song. And it's very vibrant, it's very lovely. And the sun is starting to set and it's picturesque. Then the song turns slow, and I put my arms around his shoulders, and he puts his hand on my waist. And it's like very middle school dance. But the proximity that we have as soon as this happens is like extra electric and extra awesome. This was like kind of a telltale moment of how all the rest of our interactions would be very magnetic and very electric. I thought that I might be with him for maybe 3 months and it would be an awesome summer fling, but it became like watching anime together on the couch and just like puzzle pieces fitting together and just always on top of each other, always next to each other, always moving each other's hair behind our ears. Um, more kisses than I've ever shared in life before or since. More just quietly rolling away from the rest of the group to go to the room because, we're the only two people in the world. And like touching just, it meant something different for us. And we had conversations because he worked out of town a lot of times. And we would talk on the phone. We had great conversations, but as soon as we came back together, it could be an anime, it could be a drive to nowhere, it could be sitting on the couch, it could be laying in bed. I have never enjoyed like physical interaction as much as I have with him. And again, like 3-month long relationship turned into almost a year. So that puts into perspective for me, like the beauty of touching and like how important it is to be able to revel in somebody else's physical presence. I'm just looking forward to these days that I hope we have, all of us ahead of us, where, the pandemic is going to be more like a seasonal experience where we have to take greater precautions and we'll all be able to like kind of experience a little bit more of that watermelon sugar.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What is happening? Somebody. Okay, so how do you feel after that telling?
I feel like I don't know what feedback you're going to give me to go back and say it again. so I'm like, uh-oh, because like I edited it. I made it definitely a TV PG telling, but I think that like the experience was very, very warm and very sweet, but also like really explicit. Like our time together was just like I have never I love languages. I love to talk. I was in interpreter studies in college. I've used words and signs and anything to express myself, and like I've never used my body so much in my life to express myself. So I'm just like, okay, I still sort of T for teen filtered that experience for
Yeah.
y'all. So I'm like, hopefully I don't really have to retell it because like the other side of that story is like it's not very far away. And I just want to make sure nobody who's gonna question me about it later is watching this.
Right. Okay. So we are not gonna up it from PG rating. I was medium nervous, expectant with your intro, but no, there's totally PG. What I am gonna say right off the top is this story is full of less is more. You've got these great scenes and images and anecdotes, and you'll hit them repeatedly, and we get them the first time. And you've got these moments where it's really sweet, and then you give another really sweet, and then you give another really sweet. And if you just did the one, it would hit us harder.
Okay.
So I think this version easily gets down to 5 minutes. One of the things that I'm questioning is, what are the stakes? Where is the conflict? What do we think about not having it? This is kind of a very different style story. Then thirdly, before I open it up, I know Mac has some stuff. There is a show called Body Storytelling, and I've been trying to come up with a thing to do it, and we should both pitch it, and we should work on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, what a beautiful and wonderful story. My God.
Thank
and
you, Matt.
wonderful details. Like that you would push each other's hair back around each other's ears, for instance. And the other thing I just want to really count is that the excitement builds in this, that you sort of set us up. I wasn't quite sure where you're going. And then you're on the couch with this guy and, your boyfriend walks in, your ex-boyfriend, and he says, whoa, what? Like, whoa. And then, to tell this story in great detail about the meeting, it's just like, that's sort of like the climax of the story. Like, that's really we're right there. So you really are, you have wonderful details and wonderful energy in this story. And you resolve it really well. So I think I'm more interested in, if you were going to take this story, make it, bring it down, what you would do with it. Because you do have just great stuff there. And it's a very vulnerable story. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mac. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, I have no idea where. I would really appreciate very specific instances if anyone has any, maybe Dan, where like get rid of this example and keep this example. I think I saw a couple of people write about like us pushing each other's hair back behind our ears. So I would keep that. What should I let go of?
Yeah. I think that was your first one, and that was one where there was like a couple after that, and I think that push your hair, you can go into a little closer, and give yourself room to pause after it, and then the other ones that are after that, I think that's a good place. Does anybody else have stuff? I'm gonna throw it to Susan. You gotta unmute, or
Sorry. Yeah, I thought it was a really, really sweet story, and you had me through the whole story, like just wondering, how is she going to pull this off? She's just invited like 5 people over. Like, what does she have up? And like, I need to learn something here. I can't pull that off. So you had me through that whole story, and I really did like it. I, of course, want to know what happened to him. Like, how do you let that go? So, but besides that, I was just like, I was totally in that story, like just wondering how this is gonna work. And, oh, I hope it doesn't end. And then you're kind of like, just like as you said, like before with the other one, you're like, oh, we're all mature, and it just kind of ends, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, I loved it.
Susan, thank you.
boom, boom, boom.
So I want to echo a little bit what Dan said. I was also on the edge of my seat given the intro. Like, what shocking thing is going to happen? When am I going to blush here? We're in a public park. Oh no, is this the part? I don't know. So yeah, and the scene in the park for me was the thing that stuck with me the most. There's a like community festival in Columbus called ComFest, and it evoked that for me. That sort of anything goes as long as you're being cool about it festival. So yeah, it spoke to me, and it was like, that's the spot where sort of the classic love story thing happens. I felt like you can spend less time telling us background about you're not really a touch person. I feel like that can be condensed down into a couple sentences. I did like the beginning because it did build that suspense. And yeah, that the scene where you're talking to your ex, I liked it, and I think it could be, we don't need that much there. We can just hear that. My phone is ringing. I'm sorry. We can hear that, what's up? What's the deal? When we were dating, you never snuggled up to me. What's going on? Like, that basically tells us everything that we need to know.
Right.
So that's what I had. But awesome story. Very, very lovely. And I really enjoyed that.
Thanks, Noah.
Can I make stuff bigger? Oh, I can.
I want to hear from Vanessa too. Vanessa, could you have feedback for Kay?
First, I guess I just wanted to say, like, thank you so much for sharing something so personal and beautiful, and so especially resonates now with all, like, I've been very by myself for the majority of quarantine. So, like, hearing something about touch is very touching in a, no pun intended, kind of way. And I felt like very at ease. Like when you were telling your story, I felt like I was hanging out with a friend and they were sort of relaying to me something that was relating something, and I felt like very drawn in by how personable and at ease you were. I think like when a speaker's at ease, it kind of puts everybody else at ease. I guess the only question I had was sort of like, what about like this individual suddenly made touch sort of much more important to you, I guess. Like that's the only real question I have. I really enjoy the detail, like the yeah. So
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank
Thank you, Vanessa.
I should have written people's things down because I was like, oh, I've got a whole idea for us now. And now I'm like, oh wait, they give me a whole new idea. Okay, so we gotta wrestle. We've got a little bit of time. We've got to wrestle with this idea, or people have to help me with it, with this idea of stakes and conflict. Do we want it? Do we want to try to subvert that normal narrative with this story and it's just this beautiful thing? How does anybody have thoughts on that?
Well, Dan,
those are
Dan,
yeah.
The conflict, I think, Kay, is within you. That you're discovering a part of yourself you didn't quite know existed, and you're acting impulsively on looks. And so it's a soft conflict in that way, but it's this was transformational for you. You'll never be the same again. And so I think it holds that way. I don't think it has to be amped up myself. It holds as a change moment for you.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind hearing more from Kay about like what that meant to her. Like, is she going to look for it again, or is she just putting that in the back of her head as that was a nice thing, but I'm going back to like I just want conversation.
Good question. Thank you, Mac. That you saw the conflict, because my ex saw the conflict too. He was like, "Bro, what's the deal?" I wished our relationship was more like that, and yeah. So I think that I do look for that now. Obviously, we've had a year of pandemic life, and a lot of us have decided to put distance between us and the people that we care about if they don't already live in our household, just for safety, just as a public health concern. So when you think about rejoining with folks who don't live with you, it's like, I think that's going to carry a lot of significance for a lot of people. And I know that it does carry more significance for me now than it used to, the physical aspect of being with someone when I get my shots. I've got a bunch of friends who are just, we call ourselves the Wild Old Boys and Girls Club. Like, Dan, you know me from Chicago. I have not changed. So there's a lot of people who are like, I'm going to get my shots and we're just going to go off to the races. And I think that I always had like a place in my life for physical interaction with people, whether it was romantic or platonic. But it was like, yes, I'll have a serving of that and I'll have a helping of that. And this relationship made me feel more like this was another language that I was learning, and like I can't unlearn it. Like now that I speak English and un poquito español, like you can't ever take that from me. And so, uh, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Let's see if we can break some stuff down and get a 5-minute version is what we're gonna try for. So what we've got right now, just in terms of scenes, is we've got, and Noah pointed it out that it created some tension. You've got this intro, which is arguably part of the story. And I think I'm going to do eventually a lesson specifically on this about when you first come to the mic, if you're in a thing and you've got a stopwatch on you, when do they start that stopwatch?
Right.
You sort of have some wiggle room on, hello, it's so good to see everybody. Thank you for coming out. Your intro of, just so you know, this isn't going to be PG, wasn't the start of your story, but it informed that story. So there's a lot to talk about there. But for right now, the question is, do we want to keep it? And I'm seeing people nod yes. Oh, you're saying no. Okay. So I'm with you, Mac.
Yeah,
for the second.
I think, Kay, you could just for experiment go right to the couch. You could start at the couch, and maybe it's neat the way you tie that into larger theme at the beginning, but you could really start there to see what happened.
Yeah. But I'm gonna go through the scenes in order right now. So after the intro, then you have this cool bit about sort of pop culture stuff, about Harry Styles and the Grammys and songs. And that was actually pretty long. And I think this is, again, a question of how much does this stay in? What do you need here from this? That's part of your story, because your story is really about this dude. It's not about the Grammys. It's not about this pop culture stuff. But the Harry Styles, like, it was a good scene. Is it part of this story? How do we use this scene to influence the story? There's a question there. And then from there, is the next scene the couch? I think so. Yeah. All right. So couch, Atlanta, and then you go to later, sort of time jump, sitting on the couch, and then, because the first couch is buying the couch, then you're sitting on the couch, and then you're time jumping the first time you see this guy at the Jazz Fest. And is that no? And then you go back to the couch.
So I've got the couch, and then my ex, says hi and bye, and later he says, "Dude, we never chilled like that. What's up with that?" And I was like, "Oh, you're right. Like that's not really me, but like this whole thing was different."
What is your very last scene that you leave us with? What was that last image?
Of everybody having that like watermelon sugar opportunity, like that opportunity to be in physical proximity to people that you care about, when we've all been when many of us have felt the need to be alone, for safety.
Yeah, but there was some place that
like the
you
physical
as a character
scene
was, yeah. And I think you had just left the couch to like lay with this guy.
I talked about a couple of things that we did in terms of like watching anime, or just like laying together, just being chill, taking a drive,
so
and we didn't have anywhere to be.
Right. So yeah, that helps me. That's why it didn't stick so well. It was what would you call that? It's like almost a montage.
Yeah.
Is how it ended up. And so That's a really cool technique. And it is not one that I have played with very much. I was just in a class where they talked about that with Sidney Davis Jr. And because I am not fully familiar, I think we're gonna cut it, but not because it's bad, but because I don't know how to help you with it.
No worries.
So this is a lot. We're gonna try to break it down for sense of working on this into 3 and see what that looks like. That's what I think can happen. What do you? I think I put it in the thing. This is dedicated to touch is such a great line, and I think that's all we need from that Grammy section. I think you can pull it out from there and be like, I just watched the Grammys and it made me think of Harry Styles. This is a free association story. I just watched the Grammys. I saw Harry Styles. This is dedicated to touch. And if you're in the know, you know. And if you're not, now you know. I'm just spitballing. But however you do that, I think that's like all you need. However it is your way to get to that line and let people know that it's, not lifted, but like in honor of, inspired by.
Yeah. The other part there is that pile in the video, and the video is that image of the pile of people on the beach has stayed with me. So, so just thinking about that, throw that.
Yeah. So, yeah. Gonna switch over to you. So that might be an in. Oh, you want up?
Nope. I was just gonna say, I have a comment in the chat for Kay, and it says Alien Navigation. By the way, I love your username. It says, love that all of your scenes with them are non-verbal. In boxes in the telling, including asking him to dance. So just that comment.
Thank you.
Couch Atlanta. And so do we start at the couch or do you start at seeing the dude? You start at the couch and you start with the conflict. I think you're right. I think you're right. I see that version, Mac. Okay, it's coming. So so you get the line, you get the scene, you're on the couch, and you just go straight to, I'm sitting on one couch seat with this dude when my ex, who's still my roommate, because that's how I roll, comes in, and he later is like, you never sat like that with me. Noah, this is another tricky part of this is like, I feel like we in here know what sapiosexual means. Did anybody in our crew get screwed up with that? A little bit.
The old guy.
Okay. Susan, yeah, that is a wonder to me. Like, as soon as you say it, that's the lingo I'm familiar with, so I knew what you were talking about. Noah was sort of pushing this idea that you can get it by just showing, right? Because he says this thing, you weren't like that with me. Like that, I think that is the like piece of the puzzle that, again, you're going to try to get in the knowledge of understanding what sapiosexual is as condensed as possible.
Okay.
And so it's like, he says this and I don't know if this rings true to you, right? And so you stop me if it seems false.
Okay.
But him saying it is sort of like a click where you're like, oh, that's right. That is true. I wasn't like that with you. And it becomes like an epiphany thing. Is that true, or is it more like the epiphany just happened right immediately in the next scene when you see him for the first time? You're like, this is a guy who I would be comfortable holding hands with.
I think the epiphany is when my ex gives me that feedback because
Oh,
I
that's
didn't
great
know
then.
what I was doing at Jazz Fest. I was just like,
Yeah, autopilot. Right.
yeah.
Okay. Then that's great. I think that that's great because that's like the insight. That's what we say. We want to start at the inciting incident as soon as possible, and then that becomes the inciting incident. You get that line, you get him coming in and saying it, and then you let us know. Boom! What is going on? And I remember Jazz Fest not too long ago, and as soon as I saw this guy, it was different, and it's just pick a small, you give this long, it's a very cool thing, but what I want you to try to do, and this is a Matthew Dix trick, is pick one thing of his description. What is the dude's name?
Trey.
Trey. Thank you. Okay, so we want to pick 3 things for Trey, and one is going to be physical, like his height or his physique or whatever, physical. One is going to be his name, and we're going to name him. And then one is going to be a quirky thing, right? Like whether it's you had a bunch of, not quirky, but like cool things that he was wearing. But if you want it to be something, you could tell you had a bunch of things, but we're going to pull it down to 3. A physical trait, a name, and a thing. And that's going to be enough for us to remember him and know that he's special because he got these things.
Okay.
And then you explain the sapiosexual and end with your montage. What do we think? Or do we want to try to have one specific scene where we get to the watermelon sugar moment? I don't know what's happening with people's videos. Does anybody have one that pulled out for them that was like, that's the watermelon sugar moment? Or Kay, do you feel like this is enough to go off of?
If I'm envisioning it the way that I think you just laid out the new trajectory,
Yeah.
I might mention the Grammys, but focus on like the dedicated to touch caption of the video and then move directly to the couch where my ex is coming in and he gives me the feedback later. We were never like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. We weren't like that. I'm not usually like this with anybody. And I take us to Jazz Fest, 3 things about Trey, which is going to be tough. And then, so after the 3 things with Trey, just to describe him so you can remember his name with a face, what's my next stop? Do I go straight to the montage?
Yes. And that's
Okay.
where it ends. And then
Okay.
you're just like, everything was different once I saw this Trey guy, and everything was different. And it was for 3 months, which I thought the relationship was going to be. And it was for a year, which is what the relationship actually lasted as we did our watermelon sugar thing. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Tastes like strawberries on a summer evening.
I don't know if y'all can hear that. That's watermelon sugar for real.
Sounds just like a song.
The Grammys was awesome the other night. I really enjoyed it, mostly because of Harry Styles. Now, his live performance of this song was awesome, but it really just made me go back to when he released the video for this song, Watermelon Sugar. At the height of the pandemic, one of the heights, the video zooms in on this beautiful, massive like ocean and all the sand stretching out in front of you, all the room in the world. But there's a group of people, like 10 plus people, just sitting on top of one another, entangled in one another, leaning into one another, smiling, laughing. They are together. And you feel the energy coming off of the screen when you watch the video. The caption lets you know that this was shot pre-pandemic, and it also says dedicated to touching, which I thought was like, yeah, like where I am right now in terms of how I feel about touching folks and being connected to people is totally different than most of my whole life and most of my dating life. So a few years ago in Atlanta, I'm renting a house with my former partner, who's now my housemate, and 3 other people. We've got lots of space. We've got this huge couch. It takes up like a wall and a half. But when my former partner D comes in, he sees me on like one triangle of this sectional couch, locked up with my current partner, Trey. And we are all very mature people. We're all very, kind and thoughtful and open, and it's no problem to see your ex with the new person. So D just says hi and bye and keeps it pushing until later that evening when he's like, can I ask you something? Because like we have our like dream couch where all our friends can sit down at the same time and we can entertain folks the way we always wanted to. And even though we're not together and it's cool, there was no space between you and Trey. And you never, ever would have let me stay that close to you. And when he said it, I knew it wasn't like mostly a jealousy thing. I think it was mostly a like for real. Like, what's up with that? Like, there's a jealousy thing, but there's also like, I want you to feel free to be yourself. Who are you? And I was like, wow, yeah. Who am I? Because I thought I was a person who had summer flings and would kind of move past it and go into the next chapter in the phase. But one lovely spring before, I guess a couple of weeks before this conversation with D and a host of our other friends all decided to pack up our blankets and our picnic baskets and our decriminalized weed and beverages and head out to Atlanta Jazz Fest. When I tell you this is the perfect day, this is the perfect spring day. When you feel the breeze on your skin, you're not too cold. When you feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, you're not burning. You're just like, almost like you're not wearing anything at all. Like it's the perfect temperature. You're not confined, you're not cold, you're not too hot. It's perfect. And we lay out all these blankets and we've got lots of space for one another. So even though we're like a crew of 8 or more, everybody's got their personal space. And I'm just surveying the scene as like this beautiful jazz music is wafting through the air. We're a little bit away from the stage and the speakers are pointed right at us. When I look to the right, I see another group that reminds me of our group. And then I see Trey. I Looney Tune style, literally. I double take. I look over like, oh my gosh. I can't tell you why he struck me this way. Something about his posture. He was sitting cross-legged, but I felt like the energy of a lion, like a really powerful creature who was at rest. And he had these long locks past his shoulders and these thin wireframe glasses. And I just wanted to know who he was. I talked to my friends who are all baked out at this point, and they're usually chill even when they're sober. Do you mind if I invite the folks on the other blankets to come chill with us? Oh, yeah, bring them over. And everybody moves to our blanket. But it's also that I can get to know Trey. I extend my hand to my girlfriend and ask her if she wants to dance because the jazz is just amazing. To this day, don't know if she was my wing woman in this moment or she was just too baked to come dance with me and she was chill. She doesn't get up. And so I extend my hand to Trey and he decides to come dance with me. And we're very middle school-esque and we dance with a certain proper amount of like space between us, but my arms are over his shoulders and his hand is on my waist. When the song slows down, the space between us disappears. And that is really what happened for the rest of our relationship. I thought it would be maybe 3 months of a summer fling, but it was almost a year of driving to nowhere in particular. And he would move my hair behind my ear and I would move his hair behind his ear. And we would excuse ourselves from the rest of the group and go just lay together on the bed or do more than that. And we would have good conversations. Conversation was wonderful, but we just didn't need any words. And it was the first time in my dating life where I really didn't need any words. Like touching was what we were doing, and we said everything we needed to say. When I hope that, the world gets to the other side of this pandemic and it's a more manageable thing where we can plan together and people can come out of doors and people can figure out what the next stage looks like. I hope that there are more like watermelon sugar moments for people where you can just connect and be with someone, and enough said.
That's great. Thank you so much. We are going to spin right into... One second. We are going to spin right into the next part. Where is everybody up? What am I doing? There's a button to press here, and it's this one. We're going to go straight into the next storyteller. We do a special thing here, and somebody's going to intro it real fast.
Intro it. I got
Thank
that
you.
one. I got Dan. So this is the other piece of this magic. And what's really going to happen is Noah is going to retell one of these two stories in his voice. And one of the reasons we do that is to really help you as listeners get a sense, and the storytellers as well, what voice is all about. People talk about voice, but this is one way to see how unique a storyteller's voice can be. And I'm going to just read you one more thing. This is from George Sanders. It captures this. He talks about in his class what he's working to do is help each teller or each writer achieve their iconic space, the place from which they will write stories only they could write, using what makes them uniquely themselves, their strengths, their weaknesses, their obsessions, their peculiarities, the whole deal. At this level, good writing is assumed. The goal is to help them acquire the technical means to become defiantly and joyfully themselves. And I just want to say that for both Vanessa, for both you, and Kay, for you. I felt like in your stories you were defiantly and joyfully yourself. Let's see what Noah does with the story, the one he picks.
All right. So I'm going to take a shot at Vanessa's story because I really liked how it reminded me of that night, that election night. So it is November 3rd, 2016, and I have gathered 10 to 15 of my good friends, and we are going to usher in a new age. We're going to have a female president of our country for the very first time. We have themed blueberry and gin drinks that are mixed with blue Hawaiian punch. And we have some nasty women and some nasty women t-shirts in attendance. And we are just watching the results flow in. And we are relaxed. We are not feeling triumphant, but we are feeling relaxed and we are feeling excited. And it's a festive attitude. We're playing video games in the commercial breaks. But as time goes on, a feeling of dread sets in, and sort of the energy is draining out. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, we sort of awaken from a daze, realizing that the thing we couldn't even conceive of happening, 4 hours ago has transcended, and we're facing 4 years of someone who we know is going to make our country a lot more dangerous for many people in the room. And I was devastated, and I tried to offer comfort to my friends. But in hindsight, I really feel a little disappointed in myself. I feel like I was naive. I was offering platitudes. I was, telling people, oh, it's been bad before, and people were still able to thrive. But, it was so much worse than I thought. And pretty quickly, I sort of threw myself in trying to make sense of this and deal with it. I volunteered more. I gave to charities. But I think something that really helped me was watching old Star Trek episodes with my partner at the time. And I won't say that they were a Trekkie, but they had a highly curated selection of Star Trek that sort of they welcomed me into the fandom with. And I found comfort in that hope of a triumphant future. And it helped me deal a little bit with it. And I actually got into it so much that I started watching the bad episodes, the episodes that my partner refused to watch with me. And just like on that election night, there was a little bit of a reckoning, they weren't all gems. There is sexism. There is bad writing. There is a very male-centered white perspective behind that show. But I still love it. And I think what I realized is that we have to take charge of our future. And so analyzing and dissecting bad Star Trek was one of the ways I found to do that. That's what I got.
Dan, you're muted, Dan.
Of course I am. This show was really great. Thank you, everyone. We've thrown in the Discord a million times. I'm gonna highlight it for people who are watching. Everybody's gonna say goodbye, and we'll see you in a couple minutes in Discord. Take a bathroom break and then join us and swap stories with us and say hi to all.
You sound like a commercial.
Oh yeah. What other commercial thing do I need to say? Thank you for reminding me. If you haven't, follow us on Facebook. Follow us here, especially on Twitch. We're running a special April 5th April Fool's Day show, and it's going to be way tighter than it's ever been. Goodbye.
Bye. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.